Across town, in a quiet, cracked apartment building on the east side of Chicago, Sarah Cooper stared at the creamy wedding invitation in her trembling hands. She hadn't heard that name, Daniel's name, in 3 years. Not since the night he left her. Broke, pregnant, and heartbroken. Her fingers brushed over the embossed gold letters. Daniel Cooper and Madison Gray, the union of two souls. For a moment, her vision blurred. She could almost hear Daniel's cold voice again. "You're nothing without me. Sarah, you'll see." Her throat tightened, but she smiled a sad, knowing smile. The room behind her echoed with laughter. 3 small voices, her triplets, Ella, Evan and Emma, were coloring on the floor, their giggles chasing away the silence. "Mummy, what's that?" little Ella asked, pointing at the invitation. "An old friend's wedding," Sarah said softly. "Are we going to—" Evan piped up. Sarah hesitated. She'd long stopped dreaming of revenge. Life had been cruel enough. But part of her wanted to see him one last time, to show him she wasn't broken anymore. She folded the card, her heart steady now. "Yes," she whispered. "We're going." That night, as rain tapped against the window, Sarah sat on her old couch, remembering how it all began, 3 years ago. Daniel was everything charming, ambitious, with dreams bigger than their little town. She'd loved him since college. When he proposed, they promised forever. But when his family's business collapsed and bills piled up, Daniel changed. The sparkle in his eyes turned into resentment. "You don't understand, Sarah," he'd snapped one night, packing his things. "I can't live like this, scraping by, waiting for miracles." "Daniel, we'll rebuild," she pleaded. "We just need time." He turned, eyes cold. "You're holding me back." The door slammed, and that was the last time she saw him, until now, 3 years later. Sarah had built a small but steady life. She worked as a nurse at a local clinic, taking night shifts and online courses. Every smile from her children was proof she didn't need luxury, just love. But the thought of facing Daniel again churned inside her. Would he even recognize her? Would he mock her the way he once did? She took a deep breath and looked at the old photo on her nightstand, their wedding picture. She placed it face down. This time, she murmured, "You won't see me cry." Meanwhile, across town, Daniel laughed with his new fiancée. Madison Gray, a wealthy socialite with $1 million smile and a heart made of glass. Madison tilted her head. "You actually invited your ex—" Daniel chuckled. "She deserves to see what she lost." Madison smirked. "And what exactly did she lose?" He raised his glass. "Me." They laughed, but behind Daniel's smirk, there was something else. A flicker of curiosity. A question he'd never admit out loud. Would she even come? Days passed. The wedding day arrived like a storm. Bright skies, soft music, and fake smiles. Daniel stood near the altar, scanning the crowd. Everyone who mattered was there. His business partners, his new in-law, his mother who had always disapproved of Sarah. But no sign of her. He exhaled, half disappointed, half relieved. Maybe she didn't have the courage to face him then. The sound of an engine, not just any car, a black stretch limousine rolled up to the entrance. Gleaming under the morning sun, guests turned. Murmuring from inside the limo, stepped Sarah, radiant in a flowing pastel dress that whispered elegance. Her hair glimmered in the light, her confidence effortless. And when the 3 little children stepped out behind her, triplets, identical smiles, holding her hands, the crowd gasped. Daniel froze. The world around him blurred. Madison's eyes widened. Who are they? Sarah looked straight at Daniel, composed, and heartbreakingly graceful. "They're my children," she said softly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then, with a small smile, she added, "Our children." The whispers filled the wedding hall like wildfire. She said, "Our children." Wait, Daniel has kids? Wasn't she the poor nurse he divorced? Daniel's mother, Evelyn Cooper, nearly dropped her champagne glass. "Daniel," she hissed under her breath, "what does she mean, our children?" But Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't, because in that moment, every memory he'd buried came crashing back. Every choice, every cruel word, every tear Sarah shed. 3 years earlier, back when love was still innocent, and their biggest dream was a small house with a white fence, Sarah was a nursing student, working late shifts to pay tuition. Daniel was the golden boy, ambitious, charming, and just starting his career in real estate. They met at a diner where Sarah worked, part-time. She spilled coffee on his shirt. He laughed instead of yelling. That's how it began. From that night, they were inseparable, to dreamers with empty pockets but hearts full of plans. They'd walk home together after her shifts, talking about the future. One day, "I'll build us a big house," Daniel said, grinning. "A real one, with a backyard, and you'll never have to work nights again." "And I'll fill it with laughter," Sarah smiled. "And maybe little feet running around." They married 2 years later in a small church. No designer dresses, no fancy rings. Just love, raw and real. But love, when tested by money, often falters. Daniel's company promised big returns until a market crash hit. He lost everything overnight. Debts piled up. Their apartment lease expired. Sarah, pregnant and exhausted, picked up extra shifts to keep them fed. She'd come home smelling like antiseptic, her hands cracked from washing too much. Yet she never complained, but Daniel did. He began to change. His voice grew sharper, his patience thinner. "You don't understand what it feels like to fail," he shouted one night. "I understand hunger," Sarah said quietly. "I understand trying." He looked at her swollen belly, eyes dark. "You think this is a life? I can't raise a kid like this. I can't be a joke." Her tears fell silently. That was the night he packed his bags. "Daniel, please. I'll come back when I'm worth something." The door slammed. And he never did. For months, Sarah tried calling him, messages unanswered. Bills came, and she faced them alone. When the babies arrived, Triplets, her hospital room was filled with both joy and silence. No flowers, no husband. No husband. She named them Ella, Evan, and Emma, because they were her everything. Nurses whispered behind her back, "Poor girl." Triplets, no father. But Sarah smiled. "They have me," she said. Life was brutal, but strangely beautiful. Between diaper changes and night shifts, Sarah built strength she never knew she had. She'd walk to the clinic with 3 toddlers in a stroller, head held high. She saved every dollar, went back to school, earned her nursing license, and even opened a small community care center that provided free checkups for single mothers. Every night, when her children slept, she'd look at them and whisper, "You're my miracle. You're why I didn't give up." She thought she'd buried Daniel in her past. But fate, as always, had other plans. One evening, while attending a hospital charity gala, Sarah overheard a conversation that froze her heart. "Did you hear? Daniel Cooper's back in town, made it big this time, opening some new luxury resort deal." Her stomach dropped. The same Daniel who once said she was holding him back, now rich, engaged, and reborn. And yet, he never came to see his children. When the wedding invitation arrived 2 months later, Sarah almost laughed. It wasn't just a coincidence, it was a challenge. He didn't want to invite her, he wanted to humiliate her, to remind her that she was once the woman he left behind, poor, forgotten, discarded. But what Daniel didn't know was that Sarah had already rebuilt everything he'd destroyed. She had dignity, she had peace, and most of all, she had 3 living, breathing reminders of the love he abandoned. Back in the present, Daniel's throat tightened as Sarah approached the aisle. For the first time in years, she wasn't the fragile woman he'd left. She walked with quiet confidence, like someone who'd learnt that pain could polish a soul. Madison leaned closer, whispering sharply, "Daniel, what's going on? Who are those kids?" But Daniel couldn't take his eyes off Sarah. The children, their dark curls, their hazel eyes, they were his dot. His pulse pounded. I need a moment," he muttered, stepping away from the crowd. He found himself outside, the wind cold against his face. His reflection in the glass door looked back, a man dressed for success, but haunted by regret. 3 years, he whispered, and I never even knew. Behind him, His best man, Ryan, followed quietly. Man, you okay? What's happening? Daniel swallowed hard. They're mine, Ryan, the kids. I left her, and she raised them alone. Ryan shook his head. Damn, bro. You sure? One look is all it took. Inside, Sarah sat quietly with her children. The guests kept sneaking glances at her, some curious, some judgmental, others silently admiring her grace. Ella tugged her sleeve. Mummy, is that man my dad? Sarah paused, her eyes softened. Yes, baby. That's your dad. Does he know? Sarah smiled faintly. He does now. As music began to play, Daniel re-entered the hall, his jaw clenched, his pride crumbling piece by piece. The ceremony began, but his mind wasn't there. Every vow, every word from the priest sounded hollow, because all he could see was the woman he left behind, now glowing like everything he thought he wanted but could never earn. The air in the wedding hall had changed. Moments ago, it was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and polished smiles. Now, silence, uncomfortable. Tight, like everyone sensed something sacred about to shatter. Sarah stood near the back, her triplets beside her tiny, curious faces staring at the man they'd never met. Daniel shifted uneasily at the altar. His fiancée, Madison, squeezed his hand hard enough to hurt. Daniel, she hissed under her breath, what's going on? Tell me this isn't what it looks like. He swallowed. Madison, please. Her voice rose. You told me you divorced her because she cheated. That she was manipulative, lazy, and she stopped mid-sentence. Realizing the guests were watching, a reporter from Chicago Lifestyle magazine, invited to cover the power couple's wedding, raised her camera slightly. Click. Flash. Sarah met Daniel's eyes. Controlled. But her gaze burned through him like truth itself. Sarah. Daniel finally said, stepping down from the altar. Why are you here? Her soft laugh cut through the silence. I was invited, she said, holding up the gold-trimmed invitation. Your planner said you wanted me front row. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Madison's perfect smile cracked. You invited her. Daniel hesitated, his ego battling his shame. Wanted closure. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Closure? You mean a spectacle? She stepped closer. Every click of her heels echoed like thunder in the marble hall. You left me 3 years ago, Daniel. Said I was worthless. Said I'd never be anything without you. Her voice didn't tremble, it commanded. Daniel's jaw clenched. I was young, angry, I didn't mean you meant every word, she cut him off. You walked out when I needed you most. When I was pregnant, alone, the crowd murmured. Daniel's mother turned pale, pregnant. Someone whispered. He left her while she was pregnant. Sarah turned toward the guests, her eyes glassy but fierce. I begged him to stay. She said, her voice breaking for the first time. I told him we'd make it through, but he told me I was a burden, that I was holding him back. She gestured toward the triplets, who clung to her skirt. So I raised them alone. Worked double shifts. Slept 3 hours a night. Built a life without him. Daniel's throat tightened. Sarah, I didn't know. You never told me, Sarah laughed bitterly. You never asked. Madison stepped forward, her voice shaking. Daniel, is this true? Are those kids yours? Daniel looked at the children, identical hazel eyes staring back at him, mirrors of his own. He nodded slowly. Yes. The hall erupted in whispers. Madison's face turned crimson. You humiliated me, she snapped. You let me plan a wedding in front of your real family. How could you? Sarah interrupted, her voice steady and cold. Don't worry, Madison. I didn't come here to ruin your wedding. You both invited me to remind me how small I am. She lifted her chin. But the only thing small today is the truth you tried to hide. The priest awkwardly stepped back. The pianist stopped playing. All eyes were on the woman who refused to break. Daniel took a hesitant step closer. Sarah, please. I made a mistake. I was stupid, selfish, stop. Her tone softened, but it carried the weight of 3 long years. You didn't just make a mistake, Daniel. You abandoned us. A single tear slipped down her cheek, not of weakness, but of release. I spent years thinking I wasn't enough. That I deserved what happened. But look at me now. She motioned toward her children. I have everything I need. And I did it without your money, your name, or your approval. Daniel's chest heaved. I didn't know, Sarah. If I could turn back time, you can't. He froze. She took one step closer, voice lower now, meant for him alone. I forgave you a long time ago, Daniel. Not because you deserved it, but because I needed to be free. Her words hit harder than any slap. Madison's parents stood, visibly disgusted. This wedding is over, her father declared. We will not be part of this scandal. Madison's tears smeared her makeup as she threw the bouquet to the ground. I can't do this, she said. Storming out, the guests began to disperse, whispers trailing behind them like smoke. But Sarah remained still, her children beside her, heads high. Daniel stared at her. Eyes hollow. Sarah, he said softly, I lost everything today. She looked at him for a long moment, then gave a faint smile. No, Daniel. You lost everything 3 years ago. Today. You just realized it. As she turned to leave, her limo driver opened the door. The triplets climbed inside, their laughter like bells breaking the heavy air. Daniel watched, numb, as the limousine pulled away. The reflection of the departing car shimmered in the glass doors like a memory finally fading. For the first time in years, Daniel felt small. Not because he was poor, but because he had traded love for pride, and lost both. That night, videos from the wedding went viral. Ex-wife confronts groom at his wedding, and the truth will break your heart. Millions watched as Sarah's calm grace became a symbol of strength, but Sarah didn't care about the fame. She tucked her children into bed, kissed their foreheads, and whispered, You are my happy ending. The night after the wedding was quiet, painfully quiet. Daniel sat alone in the now empty hall. The flower petals that once symbolized joy were scattered like pieces of his own pride. The champagne had gone flat, even the lights seemed to dim in shame. He still wore his tuxedo, though the tie hung loose and his eyes were red. The image of Sarah walking away, her children's laughter fading with the sound of the limousine replayed again and again in his mind like punishment. For the first time in years, Daniel Cooper wasn't angry, he was broken. He remembered her hands cracked from hard work, yet soft when they touched his cheek years ago. He remembered her smile. When they had nothing but each other, he remembered her voice the night he walked away, trembling as she said, Don't give up on us. And he did. He gave up now. She was the one who had everything: love, family, peace, and he had a mansion full of emptiness. 3 days later, Daniel showed up at a small clinic downtown, the same one Sarah had built from the ground up. He hesitated before stepping inside. The waiting room was filled with mothers, children, and a few elderly patients. The walls were decorated with colorful crayon drawings. One caught his eye, a picture of a woman and 3 kids holding hands under a bright yellow sun. At the bottom, in messy handwriting, Mummy is our superhero. Ella Evan. And Emma. He swallowed hard. When Sarah appeared from one of the rooms, wearing her nurse's coat, Daniel's breath caught in his throat. She looked tired but radiant, the kind of beauty that came from resilience, not money. She froze when she saw him. Daniel. He nodded awkwardly. I didn't know where else to go. Her tone was calm, but distant. If you're here for sympathy, the line starts with people who've actually changed. He smiled weakly. I deserve that. He sat down across from her office desk, the same woman he once thought would never rise without him, now signing documents with her own name engraved in gold on the plaque, Sarah Cooper, RN, founder. Sarah, I wanted to say, I'm sorry, he began. Not the kind of sorry people say to ease their guilt, the kind that eats at you until you can't breathe. Sarah said nothing. She just listened. I thought success would fill the hole I felt, he continued. But I realized I was just running from what I destroyed. You were right. I left because I was weak. A long silence hung between them. Finally, Sarah sighed. You can't undo what happened, Daniel. I forgave you because I had to move on for my kids, for myself. Not for you, he nodded. I understand. I wanted to meet them. Once, if you'll let me. Sarah hesitated. Every instinct told her to protect her children from the man who'd once caused her so much pain. But then she saw the sincerity in his eyes, not pride, not manipulation, just regret. She nodded slowly. You can see them, but you'll respect my boundaries. Of course, he said quickly, his voice shaking. Moments later, the triplets entered, curious, shy, but smiling. Mummy, who's that? Little Evan asked. Sarah knelt beside them. This is Daniel. He's your dad. The kids exchanged glances, unsure what to do. Then Ella, the boldest of the three, stepped forward. Hi, Dad. Daniel's heart nearly gave out. He knelt down to her level, tears threatening to spill. Hi, sweetheart. Evan giggled. You look like me. Daniel laughed through his tears. I guess I do. Emma wrapped her small arms around his neck. Mummy said you went far away. Are you gonna stay now? Daniel's eyes met Sarah's. I'll never leave again, he whispered. Weeks passed. Daniel began visiting the clinic often, volunteering, helping raise funds for expansion. He'd sit with the kids, read them stories, and drive them to school when Sarah's shifts ran long. He didn't ask for forgiveness again. He earned it. One day at a time, one sunny afternoon, Sarah stood outside the clinic, watching Daniel teach the triplets how to plant flowers in the small garden. Their laughter filled the air, the same sound she once thought she'd lost forever, for the first time. She didn't see him as the man who abandoned her, she saw him as the man trying to rebuild. Daniel noticed her watching. He walked over. Dirt on his hands, a smile on his face. You know, they asked me if you and I are ever gonna get married again. Sarah raised an eyebrow. And what did you tell them? He grinned softly. That some mistakes deserve a lifetime to fix, but some hearts are worth waiting for. She smiled, shaking her head. You're still dramatic, he chuckled. And you're still everything I ever wanted. Months later, the clinic held its annual charity event. The biggest one yet. Daniel stood on stage, announcing a new partnership that would fund free healthcare for single mothers across Illinois. At the edge of the stage, Sarah watched with quiet pride. Not as a woman who got revenge, but as one who rebuilt herself and turned pain into purpose. When the applause ended, Daniel turned to her. He took the microphone and said softly, I once thought wealth made me powerful, but today, I learned that real power is forgiveness. The audience rose in standing ovation, not for him, but for her. Sarah's eyes glistened. She didn't need to say a word. Her life, her grace, said it all. That night, as the lights dimmed and the guests left, Daniel and Sarah stood outside under the city skyline. The triplets were asleep in the car, peaceful. Daniel whispered, Thank you for giving me a second chance. Sarah smiled faintly. You didn't get a second chance, Daniel. You earned it. He looked at her, and for once, there was no pride, no regret. Just gratitude. As they drove away, Sarah glanced out the window at the city lights. The same city that had once buried her dreams now reflected her strength. Her voice, soft but steady, narrated the truth she'd lived to learn. Sometimes, life breaks us to rebuild us. Sometimes, the people who hurt us the most become the lessons that make us unstoppable.